saw a wrong initial in my insurance policy. The maternity archive said system error. Then a newborn card, prints not mine. I called the only number. A woman said my middle name. I trembled. I stand by the window of the maternity hospital archive and look at the card with the prints of little feet. My hands are shaking. The nurse behind me nervously repeats the same thing. It's a technical error, girl. Don't pay any attention to it. The database is old. A lot of things are mixed up. But I can see these prints. I am a first-year student at the biology department, and I know how to compare patterns. These lines, these curls, they are not mine. Besides, I have a birthmark on my left heel, and here, nothing, clean skin. "Where's my card?" I ask, trying to speak calmly. I can't get an answer, only, "It's yours." But I can't live peacefully, not after what I saw in the documents. It all started 2 weeks ago. I needed to get health insurance for university. Nothing special, just a routine procedure. While filling out the form, I took out the old insurance policy that my mother kept in her dresser. The same one that was issued at birth. And there, in the line for my mother's surname, I saw not Miller, but Vo. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe someone wrote it down incorrectly, or they mixed up the forms. That happens, right? Justin, my boyfriend, said the same thing. "Sophie, so what? Correct it and forget about it. Why bother?" Justin is studying to be a doctor. He always knows what to do. I'm used to listening to him, and he's smarter, more confident. And I'm just a quiet girl who lives in a one-room apartment with her mother on the outskirts of town and tries not to cause any trouble. My mother, Deborah Miller, works as a dispatcher at a truck stop. She sits in a smoky room all day, yelling at drivers on the radio, and comes home tired and angry. She's never been warm. She never hugged me or asked how things were going at school or university. She just existed nearby, cold, closed off, as if enveloped by an invisible wall. I know nothing about my father. When I asked about him as a child, my mother would abruptly cut off the conversation. "He's not here. He never was and never will be. And don't ask again." I stopped asking. I got used to living in silence, not touching on painful topics, not creating conflicts. It's easier that way. But this policy didn't give me peace. I looked at it every evening when my mother went to work. I turned it over in my hands. I read it again and again. Alice Woe. Who was she? Why was her surname on my document? Justin said I was overreacting. "Sophie, seriously, forget it. It's just some paperwork nonsense. They're always mixing things up there." But I couldn't forget it. Why did my mom never mention this? Maybe she just didn't notice? Or maybe she doesn't know. I decided not to ask her. My mom is always stressed out and angry at the world. If I start asking her about some old documents, she'll just yell at me and say I have too much free time. So I went to the maternity hospital alone. I told Justin I was going to the library. He didn't ask for details. He had his own things to do. The maternity hospital is on the other side of town, an old building with peeling paint and narrow corridors that smell of bleach. I went inside, feeling my heart pounding in my throat. A woman with an indifferent expression was sitting at the front desk. "I need to see the archives," I said. "The basement," she nodded, without even looking up from her phone. I went down the narrow stairs. The archive turned out to be a tiny room with metal cabinets along the walls. An elderly nurse sat at a table, writing something in a notebook. "Excuse me," I began. "I need a copy of my birth certificate for insurance purposes." She looked at me skeptically. "Young lady, why do you need that? It was a long time ago. Why stir up the past?" I insisted, saying that without these documents, they wouldn't issue a policy. She sighed, got up, rummaged through old cabinets with folders, grumbled, muttered something under her breath. I stood and waited, clutching the strap of my bag. 15 minutes later, she pulled out a thick folder, put it on the table, and began to flip through the pages. Her fingers trembled, whether from old age or something else. "Here, April 23rd, 2006, your birth." She handed me a card. I looked at it, and my heart skipped a beat. It said, Mother Alice Vore's child's date of birth, April 23rd. The same day as mine, the same date. But the mother's name was unfamiliar. It's a mistake, the nurse said quickly, taking the card back. There's a glitch in the database. Don't pay any attention to it. Wait, I said, reaching out my hand. What about the prints? Can I see them? She hesitated. I saw something fighting in her eyes, something like regret or guilt. Then she sighed and turned the sheet over. There were prints of little feet and palms, inked, slightly blurred, but clear. I took out my phone and opened a photo of my foot. I had taken it a few days ago when I started to have doubts. I held the phone up to the card. The patterns didn't match, not at all. The lines on my foot were at a different angle. The curls were wider. I'm not a doctor, but I studied biology and anatomy. I knew that prints were like signatures. They can't change, and they can't be so different. And most importantly, I have a birthmark on my heel, small, brown, just below the ankle. It had always been there. My mother said it was hereditary, that her grandmother had one too. But on these prints, nothing, just bare skin. Bare. Well, this isn't my card, I said, feeling my throat go dry. The nurse abruptly took the papers from the table and shoved them back into the folder. Girl, I'm telling you, don't touch the old stuff. It's all mixed up. The people at the maternity ward made mistakes. Don't make a big deal out of it. Live peacefully. But enough, she interrupted. I'm not telling you anything else. Go. I stood there, not knowing what to do. Then I quickly took out my phone and photographed the card while the nurse was turning away the folder. She noticed the flash of the camera, but I was already walking towards the door. Stop! She shouted. Give me your phone. I ran out of the archive, up the stairs, and out onto the street. My heart was beating so hard that it felt like it was about to jump out of my chest. I walked to the bus stop, sat down on a bench, and stared at one spot for a long time, trying to calm down. Then I opened the photo on my phone, a newborn's card. The name was clearly visible, Alice Vos. Date, April 23rd, and the same fingerprints that weren't mine. In the evening, when my mother went to work, I sat down at my laptop and opened social media. I typed Alice Vo and the name of our city into the search bar. I found it right away. A profile with a photo. A woman in her 40s, neat, smiling, standing in front of a house with her husband and daughter. The daughter is tall, brightly colored, about 20 years old. The profile indicates her place of work, the Sunrise Private Clinic. I looked at this photo for a long time. I tried to find something familiar in the woman's face. Nothing. A complete stranger. I called the clinic. The secretary answered cheerfully. Sunrise Clinic, how can I help you? I need to speak to Alice Vo, I said, trying not to tremble. Alice is on vacation today. Can I take a message? I hesitated. What should I say? Hello, your name is in my documents, and I don't understand why. Yes, I finally managed to say. Please tell her that someone called about the maternity hospital. April 23rd, 2006. Have them call me back. Here's my number. I dictated the numbers and hung up. My heart was pounding as if I had run a marathon. An hour later, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I picked up the phone, holding my breath. Hello, did you leave a message about the maternity hospital? A woman's voice, concerned, slightly breathless. Yes, that was me. My name is Sophia Miller. I was born on April 23rd, 2006, in Maternity Hospital, number 3. And today I saw documents with your name on them. I don't understand what happened, but... Veronica, a little later, the voice suddenly said, and I shuddered so much that I almost dropped the phone. Veronica, my middle name, the one no one ever called me. My mother gave me 2 names at birth, Sophia Veronica Miller, but she always said, just call yourself Sophia, it's easier. And no one except my mother knew about Veronica. Even Justin didn't know. Even on my university documents, I only wrote Sophia. It was strange. Can you come tomorrow? The voice continued, and I could hear fear in it. "I need to see you. Give me your address." I was silent. My ears were ringing. My hands were shaking. "Hey, are you there?" The voice became impatient. I swallowed. "Yes, I'm here. Address. Give me the address where you live." I gave her my street, house number, and neighborhood. The voice fell silent. I could hear the woman breathing, fast, ragged breaths. Then she spoke quietly, almost in a whisper. "It's the same neighborhood. Oh my God." And she hung up. I sat on the bed, clutching the phone in my hands, unable to understand what had just happened. Who was this woman? Why did she know my middle name, which no one else knew? And what did she mean by the same neighborhood? Why did she care where I lived? I didn't sleep all night. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying that phone call in my head. Veronica, a little later. This woman knew my middle name. How? Why? Mom came home at 3 in the morning as usual after her late shift. I heard her come in, take off her shoes in the hallway, and go to the kitchen, at the sound of the refrigerator opening. Then silence. She went to bed without coming to my room. As usual, in the morning I got up at 8 when my mother had already left for work. The apartment was filled with the usual silence. I made coffee, sat down at the table, and looked at my phone. Would this woman really come? Maybe she changed her mind? Maybe she decided I was just crazy? At 9:30, the doorbell rang. I flinched, spilling coffee on the table. I wiped my hands on my jeans and went to open the door, feeling my heart beating in my throat. Standing on the doorstep was the woman from the photo on social media, Alice Woe. She was wearing a dark gray trench coat, her hair neatly pulled back and barely any makeup on her face. She looked neat and intelligent, not at all like my mother, who always wore faded jeans and old sweaters. Alice looked at me, and I saw her eyes slowly fill with tears. She didn't say anything, just stood and stared. I felt uncomfortable. "Can I come in?" she finally said quietly. I nodded and moved aside, letting her into the narrow hallway. Alice came in, carefully took off her shoes, and looked around. I could see her assessing our apartment, the peeling wallpaper, the old linoleum, the cramped space. It must have seemed awful to her after her neat house in the photo. "Come into the kitchen," I said, trying to sound confident. We sat down at the table. Alice put her large leather bag in front of her and took out a folder. Her hands were shaking. I could see her trying to pull herself together, taking deep breaths. "I don't know where to start," she said finally. "This is all so unreal." "Start with how you know my middle name," I said. "Veronica, it's not on any documents. Even my boyfriend doesn't know I have a middle name." Alice nodded, wiping her eyes with a napkin. "Because I named my daughter Veronica. When I gave birth on April 23rd, 2006, I held her in my arms for about 5 minutes. She was calm and quiet. Then they took her away, saying they needed to do some procedures, weigh her, take her fingerprints. A few hours later, they brought me a baby. They said it was my Veronica. But..." She fell silent, clutching a napkin in her hands. But I felt that it wasn't her. I can't explain it. The baby was restless, cried constantly, wouldn't breastfeed. I told the nurses and doctors, but they dismissed me. They said I had postpartum depression, that all mothers feel that way at first, that I was just tired. I tried to believe them, but something inside me screamed that this wasn't my baby. I listened, and I felt cold. Alice opened the folder and took out some old photos. A baby in the maternity ward, tiny, wrapped in a pink blanket. Then older photos. A girl of 3, 5, 10. Bright red hair, sharp eyes, not at all like Alice. "This is Veronica, my daughter, the one I raised. I loved her. I still do, but I always felt a distance. Like there was a wall between us. She was never affectionate, didn't like hugs. She grew up independent, sharp. I thought it was just her personality. But..." Alice pulled out another document, a medical record from the maternity ward. I recognized the same form I had seen yesterday in the archives. Last year, Veronica had tests done. They found she had a rare blood type. The doctor said it was strange because my husband and I have different blood types, and such a combination is practically impossible. I then remembered my suspicions, what I felt in the maternity ward, and I decided to check. "Did you do a DNA test?" I asked. Alice nodded, wiping away her tears. "Yes." Without her knowledge at first. I took her hairbrush and took it to the lab. The results came back 2 weeks later. Veronica is not my biological daughter. The room became so quiet that I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Alice looked at me, and there was so much pain in her eyes that I wanted to run away. I told her. I showed her the results. At first, she didn't believe me. Then she got angry. She shouted that I was lying, that I wanted to get rid of her. We did another test, an official one, through the clinic. The result was the same. Veronica is not my daughter, and then I started looking for answers. Alice pulled out another sheet showing a photo of a baby's footprints. I recognized the same format as the card I saw yesterday. These are prints from her birth certificate. I kept a copy. Take a look. I took the photo. The patterns were clear, but completely different from mine. I took out my phone and showed her a photo of my foot. Alice looked closely, then her eyes widened. "A birthmark," she whispered, "on the left heel." "Yes," I nodded. "I've always had it. My mother said it was hereditary." Alice trembled. She quickly rummaged through her folder and pulled out another photo, a picture of a small child's foot, apparently taken with a phone. "I took this in the maternity ward," she said, "when I held my daughter for the first time, before they took her away. Look." I put our photos side by side, and I saw it. There was a small dark spot on the foot of the baby Alice was holding, exactly in the same place as mine. "Oh my God," I whispered. Alice started to cry. She reached out as if to touch me, but stopped halfway. "They mixed us up," she said through her tears. "In the maternity ward, they gave me Veronica, and your mom got you." I sat there not knowing what to say. It was all so unreal that it felt like I was dreaming. But the pain in my chest was all too real. And Veronica?" I asked. "Does she know about me?" Alice nodded. "I told her yesterday, after you called the clinic, she said she didn't care, that she grew up with me and my husband, and we are her parents. That biology doesn't mean anything." "And what do you think?" I asked quietly. Alice looked at me for a long time, then said, "I think you're my daughter, the one I gave birth to, and I want to know you, but I understand that it's complicated, that you grew up with another woman, and that I have no right to demand anything." I nodded, feeling my throat go dry. "I need to talk to my mom, to Deborah. Does she know anything about this?" Alice shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe. Maybe she also felt that something was wrong, like me." I looked at all these papers, photos, documents, and suddenly realized my life was a lie. For all these 19 years, I had not been living with my mother. I had been living with a stranger who had raised someone else's child, and that explained so much. Why my mother was always cold, why she never hugged me, why she looked at me as if I were a stranger. "I want us all to meet," said Alice. "You, me, your mother, Veronica, my husband. We need to discuss everything, figure out what to do next." I nodded, although I wasn't sure I wanted to. "Okay, when? Tomorrow? At my place. Here's the address." She wrote the address on a piece of paper and handed it to me. Then she got up, picked up her bag. I walked her to the door. At the threshold, Alice turned around, looking at me again with tears in her eyes. "Sophie," she said quietly, "I've been looking for you for so long without even knowing what I was looking for. Thank you for calling." She left. I closed the door and sat down on the floor in the hallway, hugging my knees to my chest. I didn't cry. I just sat there staring at one spot. Then I took out my phone and dialed my mother's work number. She answered after the 5th ring, irritated. "What?" "Mom, come home. Urgently." "Sophie, I'm at work. I can't just pick up and leave." "Mom," I said as calmly as possible, "it's important. Very important. Come home." She was silent for a few seconds, then muttered, "Okay, I'll be there in an hour." I waited, sitting in the kitchen and looking at the papers Alice had left behind. Photos of someone else's child, raised by someone else's woman. Fingerprints that don't match. Documents that tell the story of a mistake. Or was it not a mistake? Mom arrived 10 minutes later. She entered the apartment angry, tired, with a cigarette in her hand. What happened? Why did I have to leave work? I silently placed the papers in front of her. The medical record from the maternity ward. The photos of the fingerprints. The results of Veronica's DNA test. Deborah looked at them and I saw her face slowly change. First incomprehension, then surprise, then something like fear. She sat down on a chair as if her legs had given way, and the cigarette fell from her fingers onto the floor. "Where did this come from?" she asked hoarsely. "From the maternity ward. And from Alice Woe, the woman who gave birth to a daughter on the same day you gave birth to me, only they gave her the wrong baby. They gave her me." Mom was silent. I could see her hands shaking. "Mom," I said quietly, "tell me the truth. Did you know?" Deborah stared at the papers for a long time. Then she looked up at me and there was something like guilt in her eyes. "I had my suspicions," she said finally, "but I didn't want to check, because what difference would it make after all these years?" The next day, we're going to see Alice. Mom sits next to me in the old Honda, staring out the window and saying nothing. She hasn't said a word since we left the apartment. She just got in the car, buckled up, and turned away. I drive, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my fingers turn white. The same thought keeps running through my head. What am I going to say to that girl? Veronica? The one who grew up instead of me in a normal family, with parents who probably loved her? The address Alice gave us leads us to the outskirts of town. We drive past a shopping center, a school, a gas station, and then the road narrows and private houses appear. Small one-story houses with neat lawns. Not rich at all, but cozy. Not like our apartment in an old building. I park near a house with white siding and blue window frames. Alice is standing on the porch. She is dressed simply. Jeans, a light sweater, her hair down. She looks younger than yesterday and scared. We get out of the car. Mom follows me, tense, as if preparing for battle. Alice comes down the porch and stops a few steps away from us. "Thank you for coming," she says quietly, looking at Mom. Deborah nods without answering. Alice leads us into the house. It's cozy inside. Wooden floors, light-colored walls, bookshelves, a sofa with soft cushions. It smells like coffee and something sweet. Cookies, I think. A man of about 45 is sitting at the kitchen table, broad-shouldered, with rough hands and a sullen face. This must be Kurt. He stands up when we enter. "Kurt," he introduces himself, extending his hand first to me, then to my mother. My mother shakes his hand briefly without smiling. I do the same. Kurt looks at us appraisingly, then sits back down at the table. Alice invites us to sit down. I sit on a chair at the table, my mother next to me. The silence is heavy, uncomfortable. "Veronica will be out in a minute," Alice says, nervously twirling a cup in her hands. She's having a hard time taking it all in. "It's hard for everyone," my mother mutters. At that moment, a girl enters the living room. She is tall, thin, with bright red hair, dyed, it seems, in some unusual shade, almost fiery. She has a nose piercing, a black t-shirt with some rock band logo, and ripped jeans. She looks at me coldly, appraisingly, and I feel uncomfortable. "So, it's you," she says, without greeting me. "The one who's supposed to be me." I remain silent. I don't know what to say. Veronica sits down on the sofa, crosses her legs, and takes out a pack of cigarettes. Alice gives her a warning look, but Veronica ignores her. Let's not get hysterical, says Kurt, looking at everyone. We need to figure this out calmly. No accusations, no shouting. Just the facts. Alice nods and lays out the papers on the table. The same ones I saw yesterday. Medical records, fingerprint photos, documents from the maternity ward. Deborah looks at them, then takes her own folder out of her bag. I didn't know she had it. I got it through a friend, Mom says. She works in the city hospital archives. I asked her to pull everything they had on the maternity ward for that day. She lays several sheets of paper on the table. I see dates, names, notes. Alice leans closer and reads, April 23rd, 2006. Alice says quietly, 2 girls, born 40 minutes apart, both healthy, both normal weight. I gave birth at 7 in the morning. She looks at Deborah. At 7:40, her mother says briefly. Alice nods, looks at the papers again. It says here that the tags on their arms were changed by a nurse practitioner. Her name was Rebecca Foster. She was 22 years old. She had just finished medical school. She worked in the maternity ward for a month. And then she quit. Of her own accord, adds Kurt, reading over her shoulder. It says, of her own accord. No explanation. Deborah suddenly clears her throat. My friend worked in that maternity ward at the time, she says, as a cleaner. I called her yesterday. She remembers that Rebecca. She said the girl was scared, crying in the hallway. She said she had mixed something up, but they told her to keep quiet. Otherwise, they would fire her without a reference, and she wouldn't be able to find another job. Alice looks at her with wide eyes. And you kept quiet. All these years, your friend knew there was a mistake and didn't say anything? Deborah looks at her coldly. What was she supposed to do? Go to the management and say, hey, I think they mixed up the children? They would have fired her on the spot, or worse, accused her of slander. I know that place. She was just a cleaning lady with no money, no connections. Who would have listened to her? But the children, Alice began, and tears welled up in her eyes. The children survived, Deborah interrupts her harshly. They grew up. Both are healthy, both are alive. Yes, maybe something went wrong. But what now? Turn back time? Alice is silent, wiping her eyes. Kurt puts his hand on her shoulder. Veronica looks at her mother with something like respect. And how did you feel? Alice suddenly asks, looking at Deborah. When they gave you the baby? When you held her for the first time? Deborah is silent for a long time. Then she says, nothing special. I was tired, scared. I had no money, no support. My husband left as soon as he found out I was pregnant. I gave birth alone. And when they gave me the baby, I had only one thought. God, how am I going to raise her? There were no maternal instincts, no happiness, just fear. She looks at me, and there is something strange in her eyes. Did I love Sophia? I don't know. Probably not. She was always kind of not herself, quiet, obedient, as if she was afraid to breathe too much. I tried, but it didn't work. And now I understand why. It hurts. I knew my mother didn't love me, but hearing it out loud is different. Alice looks at her in horror. But you raised her, she says quietly. 20 years. You fed her, clothed her, cared for her. I dragged her along. Deborah corrects her. I dragged her because I had no choice. But that doesn't mean I felt anything. And your daughter. She looks at Veronica. Your daughter grew up in comfort, with parents who could afford this house, this normality. Mine, your daughter, had a better life than she could have had with me. So nothing will change for me. Sophia is still my daughter, no matter what. I look at her and don't know what to feel. Is she protecting me? Or does she just not want to admit the truth? Veronica gets up from the sofa and goes to the door. I follow her. I need some fresh air, too. She goes out onto the porch, takes out a lighter, and lights a cigarette. I stand next to her, looking at the street. Listen, she says, without looking at me. I don't want any drama. I grew up here with them. They're my parents, period. and I don't care what's mixed up in my DNA. I nod. I don't want to change anything either. She looks at me sideways. Then why did you come? I think about it. Why? What do I want? I don't know, I say honestly. I wanted to understand why I always felt so lonely, why my mother never looked at me as if I were her own. And it all happened too suddenly. I didn't plan it. Veronica takes a drag and exhales smoke. Well, now you know. You grew up with a stranger who didn't love you, and I grew up with strangers who did love me. We were both unlucky, just in different ways. I look at her. She's rude and harsh, but for some reason, I like her honesty. Are you angry? I ask. She shrugs. At whom? At you. It's not your fault. At my parents. It's not their fault either. At that nurse who messed everything up? Maybe. But she's long gone, so why should I waste my energy on her? We stand in silence. Then Veronica throws her cigarette butt on the ground and stomps on it. Let's go, they're probably ready to fight. We return to the house. Kurt is sitting at the table looking at papers. Alice is wiping her eyes with a napkin. Deborah is sitting with a stony face. I think we need to do an official DNA test, Kurt says when we sit down, to settle the issue once and for all, so there are no doubts. Deborah shrugs. I don't mind, but I can't afford to pay for it. If you want, pay for it yourselves. Kurt nods. I'll pay. The results will be ready in a week. And then we'll see. Alice looks at me. Sophie, do you want to take this test? I nod. Yes, I do. I want to know for sure. Although, in essence, I already know. We agree to meet in 3 days at the clinic to get the tests done. Kurt writes down the address and gives me the paper. And then we go to the car. On the way home, Mom is silent. So am I. Only when we pull up to our house does she suddenly say quietly, if it's confirmed, will you go to them? I keep my hands on the steering wheel and don't know how to answer. Will I go? Will I stay? What should I do? I don't know, Mom, I finally say. She gets out of the car, closes the door, and walks to the entrance without turning around. Oh, the week before the test results are unbearably long. I go to class, sit in the library, and pretend that everything is fine. But in reality, I can't concentrate on anything. I open my biology textbook, and all I see are blurry letters. The teacher explains something, but all I hear is noise. Justin tries to talk to me. He calls, texts, invites me for coffee. I refuse for the first few days, but he insists, and I finally agree to meet him. We sit in a cafe near the university. Justin orders a latte. I just order water. He looks at me with concern and takes my hand. Sophie, you look terrible. Are you even sleeping? I shrug. No, I don't. I lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything that happened in my head. Listen, Justin says, I understand that it's hard for you, but so what? You grew up with one mother, but turned out to be the daughter of another. Life doesn't change because of a piece of paper, right? You are who you are, regardless of DNA. I look at him and suddenly feel something explode inside me. You don't understand, I say loudly, and several people at neighboring tables turn around. My whole life is a lie. For 20 years, I lived with a woman who didn't love me because I was a stranger. For 20 years, I thought there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't good enough. And it turns out, I'm just not her child. Justin pulls his hand away and looks at me in surprise. Sophie, you're yelling? So what? I get up and grab my bag. Maybe I should have started yelling a long time ago. I leave the cafe without looking back. Justin doesn't follow me, and that's fine. I don't need his support, which doesn't really support anything. He doesn't call for the next few days. Neither do I don't care. He sends me a text. Sophie, can we talk normally? I don't reply. What am I supposed to say to him? That he's incapable of understanding my pain? That his attempts to calm me down only annoy me? He lives in his own world where everything is simple and understandable. But my world has fallen apart. I spend these days as if in a fog. I go to class, but I don't take any notes. I sit in the cafeteria and watch other students laugh, talk, and live their normal lives, and I feel like I'm behind glass. I can see them, but I can't touch that normality. Mom avoids conversation, too. She comes home late and leaves early. We hardly ever see each other. One evening I hear her talking on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice is quiet but tense. I go to the door and listen. "No, I don't want to see her," Mom says. "Why? What difference will it make?" Pause. "Listen, Alice, I understand that it's hard for you, but it's hard for me too, and I don't know what to do next." Another pause. "No, Sophia will decide for herself what to do. I'm not going to hold her back." She hangs up. I quickly go back to my room and lie down on the bed. My heart is beating fast. So Alice called. She wanted to discuss something, and Mom refused. Finally, the day comes when I have to pick up the results. I go to the clinic alone. Mom is at work and says she doesn't care what they write there. Alice meets me at the entrance. She is nervous, clutching her bag, dressed neatly, but looking tired. "Are you ready?" she asks quietly. I nod. We go inside and approach the reception desk. The secretary checks our documents, goes into the office, and returns with 2 envelopes, one for me and one for Alice. We go outside and stand by the car. Alice opens her envelope with trembling hands and takes out a piece of paper. She reads it. I see her eyes fill with tears. Then she looks at me. "Sophie, you are my daughter, biologically, confirmed at 99.9%. I open my envelope. It says the same thing. Alice Woe is the biological mother of Sophie Miller, with a probability of 99.9%. Black on white, officially. Alice hugs me, cries on my shoulder. I stand there not knowing what to do. I pat her on the back, feeling strange. This is my mother, biological, but a stranger. I don't feel what I think I should feel. No warmth, no connection, just awkwardness and a desire to run away. I have to go home, I say finally, to tell Deborah. Alice lets go of me and wipes her eyes. Of course, Sophie, I want you to know that I've always loved you, even without knowing where you were. I nod and walk to the car. I sit down, put my hands on the steering wheel, and just sit there for a few minutes, staring into space. Then I start the engine and drive away. I arrive home in the evening. Mom is already home, sitting in the kitchen with a bottle of vodka. She rarely drinks, only when things get really tough. I put the envelope with the results on the table. Deborah opens it and reads it. She stares at the sheet for a long time. Then she laughs, bitterly, unpleasantly. Well, there you go. Now it's official. We've been raising other people's children for 20 years. How ironic. She drinks straight from the bottle. I sit down opposite her and look at her. Her face is tired, aged. There are dark circles under her eyes. Her hair is unwashed, hasn't been washed for several days. She looks as if she has given up. Mom, I say quietly, but you loved me, didn't you? At least a little. Deborah looks at me for a long time. I can see something struggling in her eyes. Then she says, "You already heard everything back then, Sophie. And honestly, I wasn't ready to be a mother, especially when that bastard left me pregnant and ran away. I was young, 22 years old, barely getting on my feet. I just got a job as a dispatcher, rented a room in a communal apartment. And then, suddenly, pregnancy. He disappeared the same day I told him. He just packed his things and left. He even changed his phone number." She takes a sip. "And you took away my possible future. I wanted to study, I wanted a normal job, I wanted to live. Instead, I got maternity wards, sleepless nights, diapers, baby food. I don't blame you." She looks at me. "I decided to give birth myself. I could have had an abortion, but I didn't. I kept you with me instead of giving you up to an orphanage. So if anyone is to blame here, It's that stupid nurse, that stupid dog of a father, and stupid me. She drinks again, wiping her mouth with her hand. Don't repeat my mistakes and you'll be happy, my daughter. I get up, go to my room, lie down on the bed, and stare at the ceiling for a long time. I feel an emptiness inside, so deep that it seems to swallow me up. Then I pick up my phone and text Alice. Can I come tomorrow? She replies immediately. Of course. I'll be waiting for you. What time is convenient for you? At 10, I write. I'll be waiting. Thank you for writing. The next day, I go to Alice's. She opens the door with a smile and hugs me on the threshold. Inside, it smells like baking. She has baked some cupcakes. On the table are tea, plates, and napkins. Everything is neat and homely. I'm so glad you came, she says, seating me at the table. Sophie, my girl. Finally, we are together. But I only feel Alice's awkwardness. She is sweet, warm, kind, but a stranger. We know nothing about each other. She pours me tea, puts a cupcake on a plate, tells me something about her week. I listen and nod, but the words fly past me. You know, she says suddenly, I always dreamed of having a daughter. Even when I was little, I imagined how we would bake pies together, how I would braid her hair, how we would talk about everything in the world. And then when I gave birth to Veronica, I was happy. But something was wrong. She didn't want me to hug her. She pushed me away and cried when I picked her up. I thought it was postpartum depression, that I was doing something wrong. The doctors said everything was fine, that this happens sometimes, but I felt empty, like there was a wall between us. She looks at me with tears in her eyes. And now I understand why my real daughter was somewhere out there with a strange woman, and I raised someone else's child. For 20 years, I tried to love her, tried to be a good mother, but I always felt that something was missing. I listen and understand. This is not my story. This is Alice's story, her pain, her loss, but not mine. Because my story is Deborah. No matter how rude and cold she was, she still cared for me in her own way. She fed me, clothed me, didn't give me up to a shelter. She worked 12-hour days to pay for our apartment, food, my textbooks, and that means something too, more than I thought before. At that moment, Veronica walks into the living room. She looks at me coldly and throws her bag on the sofa. She is dressed in her beauty salon uniform, a black t-shirt with a logo, and jeans. Mom said you'll be coming more often now, she says, looking at me, like to get to know each other, but I'll tell you straight, don't bother. You're a stranger, and you'll always be a stranger. Alice gets up and goes over to her. Ronnie, please don't start. Mom, enough. Veronica interrupts her. She grew up there in that apartment with that woman, and I grew up here. That's it. Don't pretend we're a family now. If you want to get to know me and talk, go ahead. But don't pretend you've always had 2 daughters, because that's a lie, and you know it. Alice cries. Veronica looks at her with something like pity, but doesn't approach her. She just picks up her phone and starts scrolling through something. At that moment, Kurt walks in. He hears Veronica's last sentence and nods as he takes off his jacket. Ronnie's right, he says, hanging his jacket on a hanger. Sophie, you're a good girl, I can see that. But you're not our daughter, not in real life. You don't know how we celebrate Christmas, what our traditions are, how we joke at the table. You weren't here when Ronnie first went to school, when she broke her arm, when she graduated. And trying to pretend it was different will only hurt everyone. Alice sits down on the sofa and sobs into her hands. Kurt comes up to her and puts his hand on her shoulder. Veronica watches this and leaves the room. I watch this scene and suddenly feel relieved. Yes, I don't need this family either. I don't have to force myself to love these people just because we share the same DNA. I don't have to try to fit into someone else's story, someone else's traditions, someone else's life. I say goodbye and leave. Alice walks me to the door and hugs me goodbye. Sophie, please don't disappear. I want to know you, at least a little. We can meet sometimes, just talk. Not as mother and daughter, but just as people. Is that okay? I nod, though I'm not sure I'll come back. I get in the car and drive home. The next morning, I wake up to a message on my phone. It's from Veronica. I open it. There's an audio file and a short message. I thought you should know the truth. I press the button. At first, there's only noise, the sounds of a coffee shop, the clinking of cups, people talking. Then Deborah's voice, sharp, familiar. Why did you invite me here? Alice's voice, quieter, uncertain. I need to talk about Sophia, about what happens next. You want to take her away? A pause. Then Deborah snorts. Take her away? She's not a thing to be taken away. You know what I mean, says Alice. Do you want her to stay with you? Or will you let her come to me? Live with me, with us. Another pause. I hear Deborah light a cigarette and take a drag. I raised her for 20 years, she finally says. She's not yours anymore. You're too late. 20 years too late. Alice's voice breaks. But she's my daughter. Biologically, Deborah interrupts. But not in life. She lived her life with me, in that lousy apartment with those lousy conditions, without proper food, without nice clothes, without your comfort. And if she goes to you now, to your cozy home, to your normal family, I don't blame her. She has the right to a better life. But that won't make you her mother. Silence. I hear Alice crying quietly. Then she asks, barely audibly, and you? Do you want Veronica, my biological daughter? Deborah is silent for a long time. I hear her take a drag on her cigarette. Then she says, I don't know, probably not. I don't want children at all. I never did. If it weren't for that bastard who impregnated me and ran away, I wouldn't have given birth. I would have lived my life without any grief, so no, I don't need another child. Especially not someone else's. Especially not one who grew up in normal conditions and looks at me like I'm some old hag. I won't ruin her happiness if she happens to have found it, because I swear I don't believe she would be happy with me. The recording cuts off. I sit on the bed, clutching the phone. My hands are shaking. Then I text Veronica, Where did you get this? She replies quickly, Mom put her old phone in her pocket when she went to that meeting. It records everything if you press the button. I thought you should know the truth. You both don't have to pretend that everything is different. I look at the message and don't know what to feel. Anger, pain, or relief? Because now I know for sure. Neither of them really needs me, not Deborah, not Alice. I'm just a mistake that happened 20 years ago in the maternity ward, and now everyone is trying to live with it, but no one knows how. I understand this after that recording. I can't live there or there. Yeah, Alice loves me, but not the real me. She loves the daughter that exists in her head, the one she dreamed of baking pies and braiding hair with, the one who is supposed to fill the void that was created 20 years ago. But I'm not that girl. I grew up in a cramped apartment where no one baked pies, where there was no tenderness or hugs. I'm different. And Deborah, she loves me because she thinks she should love me. But even so, she's not very good at it. And I can't live in this apartment anymore where every wall reminds me that I'm a mistake. I rent a room in a student dorm. It's small on the 4th floor with a window overlooking the parking lot. There's a narrow bed, a table, a chair, and an old wardrobe. But it's mine. For the first time in my life, it's mine. I get a part-time job in a laboratory at the university. $15 an hour, 20 hours a week. I wash test tubes, label samples, keep track of reagents. Nothing complicated, but it gives me enough money for rent and food. When I tell my mother that I'm leaving, she sits in the kitchen with a cup of tea and looks out the window. When? She asks without turning around. Tomorrow. She nods. Okay. I wait for her to say something else. She'll ask if I'm sure, if I need any help, but she just sits and looks out the window. And I understand. She's relieved. She no longer has to pretend to be a mother. She doesn't have to cook dinner for two when she only wants to cook for one. She doesn't have to feel guilty every time she looks at me. The next day, I pack my things. Clothes, textbooks, laptop, a few photos. Everything fits into 2 bags. Mom is at work. I leave the keys on the table and leave. Alice calls that same evening. I'm sitting on my bed in the dorm, staring at the bare walls. "Sophie, Deborah told me you left." Alice's voice is worried. "Why didn't you tell me you can live with us? I have a spare room. We can—" "No," I interrupt. "Thanks, but no." "But why?" "Sophie, you're my daughter. I want to take care of you." "Alice," I say, and my voice takes on a firmness it didn't have before. "I need time, alone. Please understand." She is silent. Then quietly, "Okay, but if you need anything, call me, please." "Okay," I say, and hang up. A week later, Justin returns. He texts me. "Sophie, we need to talk. I miss you." I don't reply. He texts again. "Well, please, let's at least meet for coffee." I don't reply again. Then he comes to the dorm. He knocks on the door. I open it and see him on the threshold with a bouquet of flowers and a guilty smile. "Sophie, I'm sorry. I was an idiot. I didn't understand how hard it was for you. Let's start over." I look at him and suddenly see it so clearly. He didn't hear me. He only hears himself. His desire to fix everything, his desire for everything to be as it was before. But I don't want it to be as it was before. "Justin," I say calmly, "it's over. I'm sorry, but I don't want to be with you." He looks at me in surprise. "What?" "But we've been together for 2 years. And for 2 years, I listened to you. I did what you thought was right, but not anymore. I'm sorry." I close the door. I stand with my back against it and listen to him walking down the hallway. He didn't even try to argue. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I can breathe freely. Several months pass. I get used to my new life. In the morning, I have classes, then I work in the lab, and in the evening, I study my textbooks in the quiet of my little room. I like this quiet. It's not depressing like it was in my mom's apartment. It's peaceful. Alice calls me once a week. We talk about trivial things: the weather, the news, her work at the clinic. Sometimes I visit her for tea. We sit in the kitchen, eat the cupcakes she bakes, and talk cautiously, avoiding painful topics. It's not motherhood, it's just a warm relationship with a kind woman who tries not to pressure me. Veronica writes to me sometimes, briefly, sarcastically. She sends memes, links to music she likes. One day she writes, "Listen, come over. I learned how to do a new manicure. I want to show you." I come over. We sit in the kitchen, drink coffee. Veronica shows me her nails, bright red with gold patterns. "Cool work," I say. She smiles. "Thanks. Listen," she says suddenly, looking at me. "If anything, you can call me. Well, if you need to talk or need help with something, I'm not your sister, but I don't know. We can try to be friends." She turns away, stirring her coffee. And yet, if everything had been as it was, I would have lived in that snake pit for 20 years, not you. At the very least, I owe you something, and I'm indebted to you, even though it's not... Well, you understand. I look at her and smile, for the first time in a long time, sincerely. "I understand. Thank you." We sit for another hour talking about her work at the salon and my studies. It's easy, no pressure, no obligations, just 2 girls drinking coffee. Deborah lives alone. Sometimes I visit her, once every 2 or 3 weeks. I bring groceries, clean the apartment. She doesn't ask me to, but I can see that it's hard for her to cope on her own. She has aged over these months. Her hair has turned gray. Her face has become gaunt. We don't talk about what happened. We just exist side by side, without warmth, but also without hatred, as always. Once when I'm cleaning the kitchen, she says, "You look better than before." I look at her in surprise. She rarely says anything like that. "Thank you, Mom." She nods and turns back to the TV. A year after it all started, I'm sitting on a bench in the park near the university. It's spring. The trees are blooming and it smells like fresh grass. I'm reading a genetics textbook. preparing for an exam. Suddenly, someone sits down next to me. I look up, and it's Alice. She smiles timidly. "Hi. Sorry for showing up without warning. I was driving by and saw you." "Hi," I say, putting down my book. We sit in silence, looking at the trees. Then Alice says, quietly, "I thought that if I found you, everything would fall into place, that I would finally feel whole, that the emptiness I've felt for 20 years would disappear. But no, right?" I look at her. "You're a good person, Alice. You're kind and caring. But you're not my mom, because a mother isn't DNA. It's 20 years together, even if they were difficult." Alice nods, wiping away her tears. "I understand. I tried. But we're strangers to each other, aren't we?" "Not strangers," I say, "just different, with different lives." She smiles sadly. "What about Deborah? Is she your mom?" I think about it. Deborah, the woman who raised me without loving me, who fed me, clothed me, carried me for 20 years, feeling that something was wrong. Is she my mom? "I don't know," I say honestly. "Probably not." She doesn't want to be. She never did. But she is my past, and I am hers. We are bound by these 20 years, whether we like it or not. And you are what could have been, but it didn't happen, and that's okay too. Alice takes my hand and squeezes it. Thank you for saying that. I needed to hear it. We sit for a while longer, then she gets up. "I have to go, but can we meet up sometimes? Just like that? As friends?" I nod. Yes, we can. She leaves. I watch her go, then return to my textbook. But I can't concentrate. I take out my phone and text Veronica. "Hi, how are you?" She replies quickly, "Fine, another client wanted neon nails. I had to explain that it would look like Christmas lights." I smile and write, "Poor thing. Yeah, listen, do you want to come over this weekend? Kurt is going to grill steaks. You can bring your mother if you want." I flinch at your mother. She means Deborah. It's interesting that Veronica calls her that. Without malice, without judgment, just a statement of fact. "I'll think about it," I write. "Okay. And by the way," she sends a meme with a cat. "This is your life right now." I look at the meme. There's a cat sitting in a box labeled New Life, looking both confused and satisfied. I laugh. I write, "Exactly." In the evening, I return to the dormitory. I go up to the 4th floor and open the door to my small room. I put down my bag, lie down on the bed, and stare at the ceiling. For the first time in 20 years, this is my own life. Not Deborah's, not Alice's, mine. I think about what happened, about the nurse who mixed us up with Veronica 20 years ago, about how that mistake changed 2 lives, mine and Ronnie's. She grew up with parents who loved her, but felt empty. I grew up with a woman who didn't love me because she felt I was a stranger. Can anyone be blamed? That nurse who got scared and ran away, Deborah who didn't check her suspicions, Alice who believed the doctors, or me who started looking for the truth. No one can be blamed because all of this is just life. Complicated, confusing, unfair, but life. For a long time, I searched for someone to blame for my life being a mistake. But now I understand my life is not a mistake. It's just my life. With everything that has happened in it, with a cold mother who didn't know how to love, with a biological mother who loves the image, not the real me, with a girl who could have been my sister but became something like a friend. And now I will decide for myself what it will be like. My phone vibrates, a message from Veronica. "I forgot to mention, if you decide to come over on the weekend, bring some decent wine. Kurt only buys cheap stuff that gives you a headache." I smile and write, "Okay, I'll try to get something decent." She sends a thumbs up emoji. I put my phone down and look at the ceiling again. But now I'm not lonely because I know I'm not alone. I have Alice who calls every week, Veronica, who sends memes and invites me out for steaks. Even Deborah, who is still sitting in that apartment watching TV. They're not perfect. I'm not perfect. But we're all trying to live with what happened. And that's something. I get up, walk over to the window. I look at the parking lot, at the other buildings, at the city in the evening. Somewhere out there is Deborah. Somewhere, Alice and Kurt. Somewhere, Veronica, who is probably painting someone's nails right now. And here, me, Sophia Miller, 20 years old, a biology student. A girl who was born as a result of a mistake, but decided that it would not define her life. I turn away from the window, sit down at the table, open my laptop. I have to write an essay on genetics. Ironic, isn't it? I start typing, and for the first time in a long time, I feel that everything will be fine. Not perfect, not like in fairy tales, but fine, in my opinion.